चरणों में मैं तुम्हें रिझाने आया हूँ। भगवान तुम्हारे चरणों में मैं तुम्हें रिझाने आया हूँ। भगवान तुम्हारे चरणों में मैं तुम्हें रिझाने आया हूँ। वाणी में तनिक मिठास नहीं, वाणी में तनिक मिठास नहीं, पर विनय सुनाने आया हूँ। पर विनय सुनाने आया हूँ। भगवान तुम्हारे चरणों में मैं तुम्हें रिझाने आया हूँ। प्रभु का चरणामृत लेने को है पास मेरे कोई पात्र नहीं। प्रभु का चरणामृत लेने को है पास मेरे कोई पात्र नहीं। आँखों के दोनों प्यालों में, आँखों के दोनों प्यालों में कुछ भीख मांगने आया हूँ। कुछ भीख मांगने आया हूँ। भगवान तुम्हारे चरणों में मैं तुम्हें रिझाने आया हूँ। तुमसे लेकर क्या भेंट धरूं, भगवान तुम्हारे चरणों में। तुमसे लेकर क्या भेंट धरूं, भगवान तुम्हारे चरणों में। मैं भिक्षुक हूँ, तुम दाता हो। मैं भिक्षुक हूँ, तुम दाता हो। संबंध बताने आया हूँ। संबंध बताने आया हूँ। भगवान तुम्हारे चरणों में मैं तुम्हें रिझाने आया हूँ। वाणी में तनिक मिठास नहीं, वाणी में तनिक मिठास नहीं, पर विनय सुनाने आया हूँ। सेवा को कोई वस्तु नहीं, फिर भी मेरा साहस देखो। सेवा को कोई वस्तु नहीं, फिर भी मेरा साहस देखो। रो रो कर तनिक मिठास नहीं, वाणी में तनिक मिठास नहीं, पर विनय सुनाने आया हूँ। भगवान तुम्हारे चरणों में मैं तुम्हें रिझाने आया हूँ। मैं तुम्हें रिझाने आया हूँ। मैं तुम्हें रिझाने आया हूँ।
My dear brothers and sisters, boys and girls, that was Soumya Narayanan, who was singing a devotional song which was an ardent aspiration of a devotee. Before we realize our identity with the divine, we treat ourselves as separate from the divine being someone remote, highly unapproachable, and just turn to the divine, as Sri Aurobindo says beautifully in Savitri, giving that analogy, the way a sunflower turns towards the sun. Uh, Attracted by the sun, but the sun is too far away, and it can only have that aspiration of that union without feeling that it can be ever possible, not realizing that actually it itself is a manifestation of the divine. So this devotee is comparing himself to a beggar who has gone to ask something precious from the divine, and what he's asking for is basically a view, being able to see the divine, and he says he doesn't have much to offer and doesn't even have much to accept what the divine can give him. In terms of offering, he says, all I have is a garland made up of my tears. So the aspiration is being sort of indicated, the intensity of the aspiration, by the teardrops. There are so many that they can make a garland. That is all I have to offer. And for the nectar that you will give me, what do I have to carry? Just the two little cups in my eyes. So that's all I have. So that was a beautiful sort of analogy, and a very poetic expression of the ardent aspiration of a devotee. Today we have in the Yes program the privilege of having a much sought after speaker, Dr. Alok Pandey. Alok ji to me, and Alok da to the youngsters all over the world. Dr. Alok Pandey is a kindred soul. Apart from that intangible relationship we have, there are at least two more tangible relationships. One is that, of course, he's a Guru Bhai, and the other that he also belongs to the medical fraternity. With that, now I pass on to Aditi, who will give him a little more formal introduction, although he doesn't really need one.
Yes, welcome everybody in today's session. Welcome Dr. Alok Pandey. I would like to extend my formal welcome to you and give a brief introduction about you. Dr. Alok Pandey is a psychiatrist by profession and a philosopher by temperament. His quest for deeper meaning, looking at the death, dying and suffering, brought him to Sri Aurobindo's teachings, and since then he has been following and practicing the path of integral yoga. He had worked in the Indian Air Force and took a premature retirement to settle in the vicinity of Sri Aurobindo Ashram. He offers his service in the ashram dispensary and also is an editor of the monthly magazine All India Magazine and a co-editor in the quarterly health magazine Dhamma, New Approaches to Medicine and Health. Dr. Pandey has written 3 major books: Death, Dying and Beyond, Patients at Crossroads and Vedas of the Body. He is also known for conducting camps on Savitri and various workshops on different topics of yoga, education, health. And you can follow more of his work and his talks on Oroma, which has a channel on YouTube as well as the website. Once again, welcome Dr. Alok Pandey. Looking forward to your session.
Namaste. Man, that is all of us, are a double birth. On one side, we have a nature, and this nature moves this limits, prepares a body, life, heart to express certain forces, which forces of nature itself. This is one part of us. Most of us are identified with nature and say, this is me. And this is what is called in the yoga terminology as the ego self. This sense of separativeness, this nature by its very nature creates shells around us, like in little eggs, which are yet to hatch. And this is how we operate, that I am separate from this universe, I am separate from the creator, I am separate from everything else. And this sense of separativeness is what is known as ignorance, because we don't know who we really are. We don't know our own cosmicity, if I may say so. We don't know our own transcendent self, which is the divine. We don't know the play of forces which move us and around us. We simply say, this is me, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, this is what I'm doing, this is what I want to do, etc., which is nothing else but a play of nature which keeps us a puppet to this entire mechanism, this machinery described in the Gita remarkably and bit frightfully as a fly caught upon the wheel. So the wheel is moving constantly, and the fly believes that it is moving the wheel, but actually it is the wheel which is moving, and the fly is simply changing the scenes and scenarios. But behind these ever-changing scenes and scenarios and circumstances and situations of life, there is something else, which is our second birth, Dvij. And that second birth is the soul within us, which is a descent of, which is nothing else but a spark of the divine, which is descended upon earth, unhappy and sublime. This is how Sri Aurobindo describes it. It has entered with a certain purpose. It has entered into this darkness, just as a seed enters into the below the soil. And while outside we may see nothing much happening, we see the soil, we see the change of seasons, we see day and night, we see somebody pouring water, and we see the storms and all these things. But deep within, the real event is going on, and that real event behind the unchanging scenario, or the repetitively changing scenario, the habitually changing scenario, there is this seed of the divine which is developing. And this seed one day begins to feel that this covering within which it is sleeping or was sleeping, it wakes up and finds it too stifling. So that's a stage when we suddenly feel that all that we have known, or all that we yet may know within the human limits, is really speaking too limited. All that we have experienced is not enough. All that we have aspired or hoped for is and received from life, and achieved and got and had, is not what can really satisfy the deep thirst within our soul or within our being, because soul comes much later. It doesn't matter what name we call it, but we feel somewhere stifled within this little cage, this prison house of nature. And we look here and there. Some during that stage declare life as a vanity of vanities, because that's when the dreams are there, but not the means to realize it. Or the means which are there, like desire, are very, very imperfect, inadequate, because when we try to realize these dreams, they are like little bubbles which break. Nothing really endures, nothing has the sense of eternity. And that's when the human consciousness takes one of these several approaches. One of them is it becomes a cynic, the worst, that well, life is like that. It's a vanity of vanities and nothing much can be done about it. Some people become agnostic because they have thought and thought within the prison house, and they find nothing really. The mind can take us to a point and not further, thus far and no further. Some start believing in a God above and beyond who can, to an extent, augment within this prison. He can probably, help us out, make life a little more comfortable within the prison. And that's what is known as the belief systems, the philosophical belief systems, the creeds, the ideologies, the sects, religions, etc., etc. But there are some who want to break free. They look for ways and means. Is there a way that we can go beyond this prison house? Is there something beyond the mind? And is it possible for human consciousness to reach towards that? And that really is the birth of aspiration. And with this aspiration, spiritual life begins. So spiritual life is, or yoga is not a belief system. And as long as we are saying that I'm doing yoga to keep my body and mind fit, I'm very far from yoga, because body and mind are still within the realm of nature. Nothing wrong with keeping the body and mind fit, nothing wrong in waking up daily morning and doing some asanas to keep our tummy in shape, nothing wrong with keeping the mind a bit more quiet and peaceful. But it is not yoga. It can at best be one of those side benefits, fringe benefits that the real yoga can give us. But yoga begins when man begins to feel that there is so much more beyond. It brings a tremendous sense of humility, at the same time a tremendous urge for progress. The two go together. Humility, because you realize all that you have achieved. There is a beautiful line in Savitri: all is too little that the world can give. And at the same time, a tremendous aspiration that what is it beyond? What is it within me which is dreaming, hoping, aspiring, longing, willing? And that's when we catch the real thread of this seed, which was lying within a sleep, and it wakes up and begins to search, who is my real mama and papa? To put it in another way, in various ways, people search for it. What is the source of the love within me? What is that source of creation? Different ways. But once aspiration is born, spiritual life begins. And its very first step in any yoga, Sri Aurobindo's yoga included, because we have to focus on integral yoga, is to break free from this circle of nature. To first get a glimpse that yes, there is a beyond. We may use the word divine. Of course, divine has many separate connotations, different connotations, but in essence, it's the utmost of what we can be. We get a glimpse of that possibility. Very often, the glimpse of this possibility comes in the persona of a master, because it's very difficult for man to conceive, to glimpse. Even when he opens, he may see a tremendous light, or he may feel a tremendous onrush of power. There are several ways that the divine glimpse can come. Sri Aurobindo describes it in Savitri very beautifully, book 1, canto 3. But it's much easier when we suddenly see someone who represents to us the very highest that we can ever conceive. When Mother was asked, who is the divine? So she is given different. At one place, he says, divine is yourself hidden behind a cloak. But at another place, he says, the divine is what you adore in Sri Aurobindo. So very often it requires a master. It's not a question of living master, but you come in contact with the master and you say, yes, there it is. This is what I am looking for. This is the, what I would want to be, not in terms of an egoistic aggrandization, but this inner possibility, this inner self. And then a new journey begins, where instead of being schooled by nature's ignorance, which is a very bad school because the teachers are very harsh, there is pain, there is, a lot of beating. And this beating has nothing to do with, good work or bad work. There are teachers who will give you a thrashing just because you have made a small little mistake. So nature's school is like that. And strangely, it becomes harsher and harsher as we are getting close to that ultimate possibility. But a new journey begins with a new master, and that master was always there behind us, within us, but we did not recognize it. This outer meeting, where we get the shock of meeting the one who is within us, outwardly in us, in a body made of this matter, where we can conceive through the senses, a tremendous starting point. And why it is a tremendous starting point? Because it makes real to the mind, which will find it very difficult to conceive of the divine as an abstraction. So this is where the journey begins, and it begins with another thing which Sri Aurobindo says. Supposing you don't have the privilege and the fortune to have a master, sometimes a representative word. You read a phrase, all life is yoga, and suddenly a veil is rent. Tattvamasi in the ancient times, that, oh, this is what I am seeking for, and that starts a new journey. This is fundamental to all yoga, and the processes are also quite common in all these yogas, and that is For instance, detachment. As long as one is attached to the ordinary life in the ordinary way through the ignorance, yoga doesn't really materialize, even if we have some aspiration. And it's very simple, because then we remain locked in that little circle. On one side, the soul is pulling us inward and upward. On the other side, something within us is clinging to the world as it is. So very often people say that Sri Aurobindo has said all life is yoga. Well, he has said all life is yoga. Subconsciously, it should become a conscious yoga. But we'll come to that a little later. So, but life as it is and our orientation to life, our attachment to life, which is best described is renunciation or detachment. This renunciation is certainly not an outer renunciation, because if it's outwardly, then we just wash the baby with the bath water, because within this world there is the possibility of the divine. So we are not to leave anything outwardly, because if we leave outwardly, then we have thrown away the very instrument through which we have to grow. So there will be contact with the world, everything will be there, but inwardly a change will begin to come. This change is what is known in yoga as the shift of consciousness inward and upward. The Gita speaks about this in the yoga of the intelligent will, and it's very interesting that the term in English is intelligent will. What is the true intelligence? Intelligence is not to seek the ephemeral and it's to seek the eternal. That which is going to last, that which is permanent, it's what is the use of will if it is going to be only grasping objects and losing what it was actually striving for through the objects? So you look for joy in an object or a relationship, but eventually we have the object but don't have what we had sought for. So upward is the first necessity in every yoga. Then in another necessity is the intense concentration. So after all, any endeavor, like be even a simple graduation from a college, not even good mark, but just a pass marks, we need a certain degree of concentration, and this concentration usually in traditionally exclusive. So we concentrate and focus on the goal. In this yoga, because we start from mindset that the divine is in everything and everywhere, we start with a all-inclusive concentration. Instead of an exclusive concentration where we are concentrating to the exclusion of the world, here we are in the world and yet we are concentrating on the divine in each and every activity. We be it stitching something, painting, dancing, music, art, science, listening, speaking, eating, breathing. So breathing can become a conscious activity, the pranayama of integral yoga, instead of the traditional ways. Bathing, getting ready, walking, sleeping, meeting friends, responding to the various events and circumstances of life. All this must be done in a way where these very activities become a means to reach out to the divine. So there is a very interesting story which many of us may have heard, when Udar once asked after 20 years of being here that, Mother, how's my yoga going? Of course, in yoga, you're not supposed to monitor yourself. You are only supposed that reminds me about the question about that bhajan, that I have nothing to give to the divine. When Mother was asked, somebody said that, Mother, I have nothing to give to you. Mother said, there is always something to give. And that something is our own self. The divine is not bothered that I have money or this or that. Our own self, which we have given to this world and to pleasures, to various sensations, to desires, to ego satisfactions, that is what the divine wants. So the mother said, well, it could have been better. So very quite flabbergasted, he said, what do you mean, Mother? I mean, how, what wrong did I do? She said, it's not a question of right and wrong. Our mind is constantly engaged with right and wrong, because mind thinks doing the right thing is divine thing. Doing the wrong thing is moving away from the divine. The right and the wrong equally tie us. In the terminology of yoga, if the right is the sattvic, not the ultimate right, but the right as we understand, the righteousness, the moral right is nothing else but a sattvic bond, very often more difficult to break. And the other one, wrong, is a tamasic bond or a rajasic bond that is more difficult at one level. But the sattvic bond, which looks very good and I do always the right thing, tick mark all the right boxes, is more difficult for such a man to turn to yoga. So the mother said, well, what do you do when you go to the bathroom? He said, Ma, I brush. Early morning, I go to the washroom and I brush. How do you brush? So that's where he started demonstrating how he brushes. And the mother said, well, all wrong. So what do you mean, Ma? So she said, do you remember me when you brush your teeth? Now, this is where the shift starts to come. In every activity, we remember and offer. This is one of the fundamental practices, both of the Karma Yoga of the Gita or the Trimarga of the Gita, as well as in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, meaning thereby a concentration upon the divine whom we want. This is the very first thing needful. Otherwise, we may think that we are doing a lot of work for the divine, lot of work for the mother, but we may be concentrated upon our ambition, upon our ego. So at the end of the whole day, when we go back, we'll have the same old story where Narada tells that, well, I'm the one who loves the divine most. And the divine has to correct him and say that, well, you may believe that you love the divine most, but do you know that whom the divine loves most? Well, Narada is surprised. He says, well, people believe that you love the divine most, and that may be right according to the opinion poll. But I love Hanuman most because he's the one who is my sevak and servant and sakha, who cannot sleep. Anything he's doing, he's thinking about me. So whether we may be doing any kind of work, even the most mundane, this idea of big or small in work, great work, important work, less work, all this has to be washed aside. There is no work big or small in the eyes of the divine. And, in who Sri Aurobindo describes it in the Live Divine, he writes a whole passage on it, Samam Brahman. But in who so beautifully describes the hand that sent Jupiter spinning through heaven, spends all its cunning to fashion a girl. In the blush of a girl, in the laughter of boy, in the blush of a girl. All these are God moments, but we have to learn to look at it that way. So this idea that I want to do something big comes from the self-aggrandizing ego. And one has to keep those things aside. It's a tremendous process and great amount of sincerity is required. That's what the mother says. So it's an all-inclusive concentration, meaning thereby, regardless of whatever we may be doing, we'll outwardly, it may look just the same thing, but inwardly the change has to come, that I do it not for myself, not for my ego satisfaction, not for my pleasure, not for what I may get from life, from world, from people, but only for the sake of serving the divine. So when we do this process, a time comes when the divine automatically becomes in everything the goal of our life. Mother puts it so beautifully. She says, you are not here to please yourself. Okay, fine. So people take this other attitude of becoming a martyr. So she corrects it. You are not here to please others. So you are here to please only the divine. So this is the very first step of yoga, that we discover the divine. But now in traditional yoga also we do it. So is there a difference? Yes, there is a difference. In traditional yoga, say Gyan Yoga, there is an exclusive concentration on the divine as knowledge, one aspect of the divine. So what happens? The thinking mind turns itself away from all the ratioinating, discursive intellect, debates, discussions, and it focuses on one idea. That idea may be Soham Asmi, Tattvamasi, or just the Onkar. And because of this intense concentration, it breaks the magic circle of nature and it realizes the divine. Or the Bhakta. His heart is all centered around on the divine. And a time comes because of this intensity of concentration of the heart. Shyam mani chakar rakhoji. Or, Mera to girdhar gopal dusro na koi. You break from the heart and find the beloved whom, one sees behind, tries to seek behind different forms and names. Or in the yoga works, where all life, where yoga works is a very powerful entry, incidentally, because here the exclusive concentration is not really possible. One is dealing with the world. One cannot cut up oneself away from the world. And that's why Sri Aurobindo says that the yoga of the Gita is one of the very powerful preparations for entry into this yoga. So when people came to the mother or wrote to Sri Aurobindo, I want some mantra from you or the mother. And Sri Aurobindo writes that the mother does not give mantras, she gives work. So the work is a powerful means of entry. So this exclusive concentration can give us a glimpse of the divine. By Gyan Yoga, the process of intense concentration, either in the Agya Chakra or even the crown chakra, one can get a glimpse of that divine effulgence, that light, that supreme source. But the problem there is, because the rest of the nature has been just left aside, the heart becomes dry, the power of works, the will, that is completely lost. So when we realize it, it's very difficult to get back into life and really deal with life. So these people have a tendency either to, form a monastery and stay there, or cut off from the world, because they have, it's very difficult to now come back into nature, which is totally unprepared. Similarly with yoga of the divine love in traditional yoga, the bhakti yoga. So one is so much exclusively concentrated upon the divine within, that one forgets that the divine dwells in this world also. In every creature he dwells, in bird and beast and stone, in the blue of the sky, in the green of the forest. Whose is the hand that has planted the glow? So that delight of the divine which is in whole creation is missed out. And there is a tendency again to withdraw. But in yoga works, it's not possible. So in yoga works, there is an additional element which comes in, which Sri Aurobindo emphasizes a lot in Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga, and that is equanimity. In Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, you don't need it. You can do away with it. Doesn't matter how you deal with this world, because you really don't want to deal with this world. But in Yoga works, because we deal with this world, equanimity becomes one of the most fundamental practices. And in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, if you read through the synthesis, if you read through any of his works, repeatedly he stresses the need for equanimity. And to put it in very brief, there are 3 levels at which equanimity operates. The physical level, Shri Krishna puts it as Shitoshna. So we are not always, monitoring the temperature outside or even our own temperature. Corona to nahi ho gaya. This tendency of all the time mind being focused upon the changes in the body, a little ache here, a little bend there, a little twist there, or changes in the environment. Shitoshna, let it be, doesn't matter. Equanimity, endure it. This is the path that those who have gone before us has shown. There is Gangadharji, such wonderful experiences, supramental experience he had. He used to live in a small little room below the staircase, even a dark room. And once when mother was going up the stairs, he was standing outside with this hands folded. And he was asked what work he wants to do. He said, I want to clean the toilets. No sadhak was ready to take that work. And when mother saw him, he says, why he has been given a room here? So the marriage and everybody is all shaken, because he said, how could you give a room? And Gangadharanji, no, mother, it's so beautiful. This is the state, doesn't matter. And this man, the way he connected to the mother, it's not that we have to deliberately start living like that. That is another extreme where the ego gets satisfaction is in, everything in yoga can be twisted. No, I am sleeping on the floor with a brick under my head. So there was a person like that also, and mother gave him a nice tight slap to change himself. So this sense of equanimity, Shitoshna. Then at the vital level, Hani Labh, Man Apaman, Jaya Jayo. Generally, we have a tendency to seek things which give us praise and to gravitate towards people who flatter us. And, in English, it's called as giving the hat to somebody. Now, we have to learn that human opinion is really not of value. If I have to do the divine work, that alone has a meaning. And yet, all these will become make our offering deeper, our consecration over. All these dualities in which the vital is ever engaged, desires and dissatisfaction. So Nishkam Karma becomes a very important aspect in this yoga. But Nishkam Karma doesn't mean that a work in which I do just casually because I am no more interested in fruit. One is to do the works disinterestedly, but with full awareness, or doing it as perfectly as possible, because now it is a service to the divine. And then at the mind's level, this idea, that opinion. So we fight like, as if my opinion is not accepted by others, it's a great crime or sin. Well, my viewpoint is the approach that my mind has taken toward the infinite. But he is infinite. He can, the same sun that lights up this entire universe drops on Sahara, and the people there find it very intense. And the same sun on the mountains is different. The same sun in Mediterranean is, experienced differently. So mental viewpoints are okay for us to move as props. Each one is given a certain path, a ray of light into the mind through which he moves, and that's valid for the person. But for another person, who is an agnostic or atheist, the divine has hidden himself. So how can we blame him? He is hidden himself. So that brings a wideness in the mind. This wideness and plasticity are very important in this yoga, because if we are fixed, if we are rigid, if we are narrow, leave the supramental, even the mental proper human is very far from us. So these are aspects which are missing in many yogas. But in this yoga, to make it simple, because how do we coordinate all these things? The concentration, even to find the divine, is on the mother. And there is a great sense in it, because the mother, I mean, sense means, I'm speaking right now intellectually, when you when one turns to the mother, all sense and nonsense enter into the super sense. But the thing is that when we concentrate on the mother, she is the super nature behind this ordinary human nature. She is the original Shakti. She knows what our nature is. So what she does is she starts preparing the entire nature. So you realize the divine, but not by breaking free from the circle magically. So in traditional yoga, you may have a glimpse very fast, but one is no more prepared for the divine manifestation. But in this yoga, it may take little time, because she's preparing the whole nature. And until that entire nature is in a reasonable state of readiness to force the doors of the divine open, Sri Aurobindo says that you cannot take the kingdom of heaven by storm. And if you try to do it, I mean, there have been instances, like Sri Ramakrishna is a classic instance who could do it. But this is not the path meant for those who want to manifest the divine. Here, the goal is not to lose oneself in the divine perfection. All yoga is, first step is freedom from ignorance. So freedom from ignorance means one no more identifies with nature. Nature is ignorant. Every movement of nature, every thought, reason which is not informed with a greater light, every movement of the heart which is not impelled by the divine love within, every movement of our will which is a slave of plaything of the forces and not inspired by the master of works, is an ignorant movement. So to step out of the ignorance means first to know that this is nature and this is me. One has discovered the psychic being and knows, no, this is not me. This first fundamental step. But in this yoga, even this is not done by an exclusive concentration, but a concentration of the mother, remembering and offering to her, so that she starts working in her own way, which is incalculable. So she doesn't work the way we expect her to work. So we may feel that at a certain level, we are very close to getting the glimpse. And then suddenly she says, no, right now, if this door opens, you'll be flooded with too much of it. She changes, shifts the scene. Now another working begins. And there she is working. And again, you feel, there am I. And no, come back here, because she's preparing the nature. And this is the mental language in which I'm saying. Simultaneously, many points she can work, because she's the divine mother. What is there because about it? So when she starts working on nature and we have glimpse of the divine, we arrive at the integral divine. Because generally when we have glimpse of the divine through the mind or through the heart, we get a partial glimpse of the divine. That's why we cannot heal the gulf between this nature and the divine. But when we go through her or with her as our companion, guide, friend, mentor, guru, mother, she didn't like the word guru, mother, father, everything, then she knows all the roots of ignorance. That's why Sri Aurobindo says that all paths become her paths. Even the most seemingly trivial act, she can pick up and use for a great revelation about ourselves. The babble of a child, suddenly you are passing by and you hear or see a child or maybe a stone casually rolling by, and suddenly it strikes you, oh, this is it. You see, that story of George Van Brickham, very interesting, that he was in a state of utter depression. Depression means a despair, whatever may have happened, that's a different story. So he was sitting in the ashram and was wondering, is there hope for somebody like me? And he sees a little worm crawling out there. So out of natural kindness, he picked up the worm on a little leaf and put it at the samadhi, saying that let him reach there. And then it struck him that, oh, if this worm can reach, why can't I? So you see a most seemingly trivial act. And who gave him the urge to do this? The mother. Who gave him the flash of lightning to see it this way? The mother. And within moments, everything was gone. So when she starts working, she works in a very different way than the way we understand. So in this yoga, the first word is surrender. One starts with surrender to the mother, which means, mother, my life is yours. Move this doll, which has been moved by 1,000 forces. Now you please move it. I become your Katputli. But she says, I don't want Katputlis. I see this is the difference between artificial intelligence and the divine intelligence. I want you conscious and living. I want you to be happy with what I'm doing. So it has to become a glad and loving submission. Not a surrender where we say, you move me, and every moment we are saying, what are you doing, mother? What is my life? Divine doesn't enjoy. He enjoys the devotee just as the devotee enjoys the divine. So when we begin to start connecting with her in a two-way process, not just I'm a Katputli automaton. Sri Aurobindo says that tamasic surrender doesn't lead us far, but a conscious and living surrender of a conscious human being, and say that you really, and in real earnest, you do with me what you want to do. And then the joy of the Leela, the wisdom behind the Leela, the power behind the Leela, everything begins to open countless doors. So many things of which the human tongue cannot really utter. One has to really experience it. But nevertheless, it starts with surrender, with aspiration and the surrender. Now we have got the second word, but actually it is the first word. Either way we look at it. How does it proceed? By a more and more surrender. Start with a central surrender. My life is yours. Use it for yourself. Then we discover so many places that I have told her that my life is yours, but what am I doing? Making a fool of myself. My life is not only yours, it is my baby, my child's, my husband's, my wife, my this, my that, my. Then you discover that I have, given a light to the divine. So you begin to, she will make us conscious. So you begin to surrender that, okay, I will do whatever I need to do for the child, but the child belongs to you. He is no more my budhape ka sahara. He is no more, that what I will get out of the child. He's no more my ATM, just as at one point of time I was his ATM. So the relation begins to change. So there's so much freedom and joy in such a relationship. And with everybody, we begin to surrender, not only relationship, things which we have. When they are there with us, we are grateful. When they go away from us, we are grateful. So the sign that surrender is becoming complete, as somebody says that Lali mere lal ki jit dekhun tit lal, Lali dekhan main gayi, main bhi ho gayi lal. The sign that surrender is become complete is a state of inner felicity and peace. The Upanishad speaks of Shantim Netaresham Sashwati, Shantim Shashwati Netaresham. So one begins to grow in that peace because one knows that, well, what is important is my relation with the Divine Mother. And everything has its place, so long as it can make me connect with her and help me, everything becomes a path. But if it is something which tries to obstruct or whatever difficulties one may have in outer life, my connection with her depends upon her and me. It is between her and me. So everywhere the path begins to open. So path is not just a geographical place, the path is in the inner space. So a new revelation begins that one carries the path everywhere, one carries the word everywhere, one carries the Divine Mother everywhere. So this is the second part, that where surrender begins to become more and more wide and all comprehensive. Then the third, what is the consummation of this yoga? A complete surrender, which means a total self-giving. That now you move me as you want to move me. One is moved entirely by her in thought and speech and word and act and will and feeling, in breathing, in sensations and everything. That's the ultimate consummation of the yoga. If one is given completely, for the individual, the yoga is complete. What about experiences? There can be no greater experience than the delight that one experiences by giving to the divine. So I can say that all this is okay, fantastic, hearing sounds and subtle sounds and seeing light, all that is okay, fine. But the delight that comes by giving oneself entirely to the divine is incomparable to anything else. And the Sri Aurobindo in Synthesis of Yoga, people think that's just sentimentality. He says that no human tongue can ever utter it, because just as the bhakta takes delight in the divine takes delight in the bhakta. And he goes on to say, there is nothing impossible or not within the reach of the bhakta, because he is the very self of the beloved. We treat the divine as ourself. The divine says, here is myself. And then the new journey starts, and the journey is returning back into nature and pouring all we receive from her into this creation. Because the goal of this yoga is not to lose oneself into the divine infinity and the eternity and the divine perfection which is within everyone. That is one way to look at yoga, but to bring that perfection down into life. But we do it with a free heart, because now we know that it's not me. That's why the knot of ego has to go completely. Otherwise, things can go berserk. When the divine Shakti pours and one thinks, oh, I'm an instrument of God. See how much work I am doing. Already the Titan is watching over. You are doing, no? Very good. Wait a bit. And he will, uh, you roll in the mud, and then you see the divine watching, and you didn't say me, no, this mud was little necessary. I have to give you now a thorough dry cleaning. So he'll take us and give a thorough dry cleaning, bring us back. So you roll back into the mud, again the same thing. So it's not because the divine doesn't want to protect you, but this is a process through which we become more and more ready. We understand that the ego is nothing and the divine is all. And the perfect state will be that when one is engaged completely, not just in egoless works, because egoless works is the state of Jivan Mukta, which already in the Gita is achieved. But now the nature of work changes. That's how all life begins to become yoga. In egoless works, which the Gita reveals to us, beyond nirvana, you can still do works as a Jivan Mukta. The works are still limited by the limited nature. So a doctor is inwardly free. He knows that it is not he who is the doer. It's a wonderful state. Freedom from this responsibility. I am the doer, I am the doer. But the works are still, when a patient comes, he will give the same prescription and say, I can only give this medicine, but the God will cure. This is the yoga of the Gita, Jivan Mukta, very high state to reach. But in this yoga, it is not just that I give this and God cures. It is God gives what he needs to give. And God is the one who cures, and God is the one who has come to me in this form. And all these are divine beings who have worn a mask, a terrible mask, a beautiful mask, and you want those masks to go so that dealing begins to change, because all is a effort at the divine manifestation, meaning thereby the mind upgrades its software from the present rational analytical mind, which is always lost in either or. It can be either this or that. And a new plenary illumination where we begin to see many things together simultaneously, many points, many possibilities. Supramental thought, Sri Aurobindo describes like that. Intuitive flashes cleave the brain, inspiration, rivers begin to flow, oceans of knowledge, superconscious knowledge begins to descend upon the mind. And if the mind is not wide and supple, it will break down. And very often in trying to become supramental, we may well become fit for the inframental stage. That's why all this preparation. And this knowledge begins to pour through the mind, through the brain, which is made ready. Mind. A bright reply to wisdom's occult plane, a calm illumination and a flame. And then this transformation of the mind, again, it's not like it is to proceed like that. Different people, different parts are ready. Begins to descend and take hold of the speech and word. It becomes conscious. And the heart. So whomever the heart loves, it is the divine in us who begins to love, which is a very powerful stage. And it's impact, and that love is freed from all this egoistic straining. Oh, I gave so much. Our love is human love, even at its best, without expectation. It's a crude calculation. Only thing is, the crude people calculate immediately. I loved you. 1 year has passed. You haven't really cooked a nice meal for me. This is human love. At its worst, it is all my life I gave to you. That's the best case scenario. It's still there. Expectation is still there. It's masking itself as if there is no expectation. So at all my life, because still the purpose was what the person is giving back to me. But when the purpose is to bring out the divine element in everyone, then the scenario changes. So the heart begins to be filled with this sweetness. After all, there is sweetness in every heart. Mother says so beautifully, bitterness is an illusion. There is sweetness within every heart. So what is bitterness? It's that dose of poison which is mixed with the sweetness. So when one drinks it, the first taste is, oh, it's very bitter. Sweetness is at the bottom. So Sri Aurobindo describes ordinary life and and the life of yoga in this way. So now there are two kinds of, poisons that are mixed. One is a sweet poison. So ordinary human life tastes very sweet at the beginning. As you come down, bitterness is there inside. You begin to taste the bitterness after the artificial smile is gone. But in yoga, the bitterness is tasted first. You taste the bitter cup, after which the wine of Ananda, the Somras, begins to come. So the heart is full of sweetness, full of joy. What wonderful felicity. The possibility of being hurt is soon goes away, and it's like it extends. Initially, it's on, one gets a little hurt, then another level. So the level keeps increasing the bar till a time comes when a universal love and Ananda become a way of life for a person. And such a person doesn't have to do anything. Such a person, wherever he goes, whomsoever he loves, whomsoever he cares, is the divine loving through that person. Then what about life and works? Well, our life, we begins to assume a new luminous force begins to flow in all the currents of life. So the nerves now. Works means nerves, the blood, the body, brain, everything is used in works. The hands, the feet. So when this new luminous force begins to pour, it's not just that we are doing the same work the way, we would do ordinarily in ignorance. New creative impulsions may come, not just through the brain, but right at the moment of working. One is beginning to pick up something and it becomes a conscious work. A new, either a thought comes or the movement happens at the most material level. Why? Because now a greater divine Shakti is informing the nerves and brain, the body, the very blood. New things can emerge, new possibilities emerge, things which we never knew are within us, possibilities to heal directly. It's definitely possible. Possibility to speak. Example, where in Baroda itself, when he was teaching life of Nelson, and students said, but sir, it is not there in our notes, which we have got from this book, that book, and Shubhendra's reply, throw the notes book out of the window. Well, he knew what he is saying by direct experience. Already at that point of time, flashes had begun to disclose. So this way, till the very body is freed from all possibility of disease, degeneration, old age, and of course, death eventually. Therein comes the third element of the yoga, the final element. When we are doing it, there are cosmic forces which try to obstruct. They don't give in so easily. Aspiration and surrender is all right. But they say, I am going to see, you have really surrendered? Yes, I have surrendered. All my works I have surrendered to the divine. See, I have left everything and I am living in the ashram, leaving behind a plush job, and they say, now I know the door through which I'll enter. You really believe, you have left things which never really belong to you. So I am going to teach you. So forces enter. One little boast, one little door through the ego. They say, let me see what you have left. And then the robe of vice, the robe of virtue, everything is split apart. So there are forces which will come and test us at, the mother uses the word the examiners in the integral yoga. And she says there are three kinds of examiners. One, which are, forces of nature. They will not concede so easily that you become their master. They will resist. So forces of nature means ordinary anger, ordinary movements of lust, greed. They will return back again and again. The charm of Rasgulla, after all. Nothing wrong in eating Rasgulla. But there is certainly something wrong in hankering after Rasgulla. Every day going and buying a pot full of Rasgulla. This is great. But if you have a Rasgulla, have it with joy, not with, oh, I have to leave Rasgulla. So this is how they will, forces of universal nature. Then there are adverse forces and hostile forces. If you progress beyond nature, they come in second line of defense. So hostile forces and adverse forces suddenly will bring in doubt, despair, depression, crying spells for no reason at all. Tremendous doubts, suspiciousness, jealousies rising from what depths, and they start corrupting. Jealousy is even in approach to the divine. Oh, that person is closer to the divine. Oh, that person is working in Sri Aurobindo's room. Why am I not able to go there? So I had this experience on my birthday, wanted to go to Sri Aurobindo's room, and I was told right in front of me, some people were allowed to go, but that's a different story. I was told, no, strictly on birthday only we allow. It was one day before birthday because I had a posting. So I sat initially, ye kya baat hai? And then I had a wonderful, most wonderful experience. Directly, Mother and Sri Aurobindo coming and saying, see, others are going there, but I am coming to you. So it was so powerful, so beautiful. I said, oh my God, the first rule of yoga, he is everywhere in everything. Of course, going to the room and ashram, they are all special places. But again, even there, the play of jealousy, the play of ambition can start. The kursi and all these things, kissa kursi ka. So we have to understand that these forces are waiting and they are very, very cunning, very astute. So the rejection of all that stands in the way, mental ideas, opinion, viewpoint, we believe we have got free from that, but suddenly there'll be a contrary viewpoint and there'll be a little shrinking inside. Oh, this fellow thinks still like that. Well, if he thinks it's still like that, it's me who thinks still like that. That's why I could observe. Otherwise, I'll see the truth behind that opinion. And that will be the end of the story. So rejection is the third aspect. Aspiration, rejection, surrender. And rejection is very difficult. So offer. So when we see obstructions coming in our nature, this mother has said that rejection is very difficult for human consciousness. So offer it. But offering means sincerity to see, Mother, this movement is still in me. I'm still attached. I'm still eyeing on that kursi, even though I have left it behind outside. But in the ashram, I'm still looking for that chair, which I can occupy. That name that, I still can have. So offer it to the mother and she will, everything that is offered changes into the divine equivalent. So this is the path, and through this, the transformation that takes place, meaning thereby, very simply, transformation is not about becoming a great ethical being, a saint or a sadhu or a holy man, etc., etc. But transformation means this entire nature, the mind, the thoughts, the heart, the voice, the speech, the feelings, life energy, the bodily apparatus being upgraded from the human to the divine, which is their utmost possibility. This is no easy task, and it requires tremendous endurance and faith and perseverance. This yoga cannot be done if one is wanting to look for a 2-week course on yoga with $2,000 and give me nirvana kind. That is only virtual reality nirvana. This yoga is a lifetime engagement. Why lifetime? Lifetime's engagement with the divine on this one goal, that only your manifestation upon earth is what I want and nothing else. Neither mukti, nor nirvana, nor moksha, because they are also subtle illusions. But I want only and only that your manifestation should take place, not even through me. In this creation, doesn't matter. If I have to become dust and the flower of your beauty can spring forth, may I become dust. And if I have to become the sun effulgent far away from the universe, but be a giver of light, may it be so. Whatever you choose for me, that is what I want. So the final mantra is, let thy will be done. It starts with let thy will be done and not mine. It ends by saying, let my will be what you will for me. So the will is in complete union with the divine. May I will what you have willed for me and what you would will for me. Namaste. If there are questions, we can take it.
Dr. Alok Pandey ended his talk with mantras. That reminded me of what the mother has said, without saying that that is how mantras are created, that it is something that the heart hears and the head translates into words. The source, of course, being the divine. So the divine sends the words, which are heard by the heart, translated by the head. And when you saw Dr. Alok Pandey with in the background the pictures of the mother and Sri Aurobindo, both the pictures being pretty close to his ears, you could have seen that as a physical expression of what was going on. The words were coming from the divine, and Dr. Alok Pandey was acting as a completely uninterrupted channel. No blocks created by any doubts and no congestion created by any unnecessary thoughts. He just let those words flow. And that is what gives to every word that he utters and every word that he writes a mantric quality. Now, over to questions.
Namaste, Alokda.
Namaste.
Sadar Pranam, Jai Ma. I have two questions.
Yeah, is that Manan?
Yes, Sada, this is Manan.
Okay, I could recognize your voice.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm certain you would. So I have two questions. Chaturvedi Badrinath Ji's work on the Mahabharata, there is a chapter on causality where he beautifully examines a few key ideas. He talks about Purushartha, he talks about Devam, and then he talks about a combination of these two. Then he talks about Swabhava, and then he talks about Kala and Kal. And he says that Vedavyasa, in the final analysis, lays maximum emphasis on Kal. And then in Sri Aurobindo's work, Synthesis of Yoga, the four aids, we see Shastra, Guru, Kala, and Utsaha. So in Sanatana Dharma, we have this concept of soul, and we talk about journey over many lifetimes and an evolving psychic being. But on an everyday basis, how do we make more consciously, peace with the passage of time in the spirit of all life is yoga, especially with all the churn around us at a global level, right? Much more uncertainty and so on. The second question is on Aryan psychological stereotype. Or what archetype? Sorry, archetype. Sri Aurobindo lays so much emphasis on recovering the Aryan spirit, and that resonates quite deeply with people all over the world. So, could you explore that a bit and also talk about imbibing the essence in everyday life? Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Manan. First of all, I was fortunate to meet Badrinathji, but he was not well, so I want to see him, and I'm aware a little bit about his work, which of course is a very well-written work on the Mahabharata with its own limitations because he's still in the mental domain. But so what is the task given to space? Space is given the task of providing room for the manifestation. He is given the task of arranging the forces to help the manifestation. Because in this world, you see, when time comes when instead of one, there is two. Now the play starts because relationship starts, and that's how time is born. So even at the micro level or the macro level, every bit of karmic transaction has to be taken account. That's why Kal is the grand accountant. He has to absorb all these things and automatically manage and put things in the right place and, in the total harmony of things, which is not an easy task. So because we have released many energies in the past and continue to release many energies, which are all on their own curves of fulfillment. Sometimes, let us say, a desire which we wanted, and after 20 years, that desire is fulfilled when we no more want it. But it is right there in front of us. What do we do with that? So time is a play field of forces, and it comes originally in Sanat Sujatya. That's how Sri Aurobindo in one of his works describes that time. So time is necessary because if you try to cut through it, because the knot of karma or the energy, not in terms of reward and punishment, but the energies and their play is so much entangled that you have to allow time to disentangle it. Time is an instrument of the Lord. But if we try to force it with impatience, it'll cut through it. And when or somebody with that, as they say, with the sword of yoga, cut the Gordian knot. But we have finished again the baby with the bathwater. So that's why patience is required in this kind of effort. Some people can do it. There are ascetics who close all lines through which time has moved by completely withdrawing from the world. But I'm not speaking of that. And that's if you ask me very frankly, if the world is a vanity, that's a vain ideal. Because ultimately you have given a lie to God and lie to creation. Giving a lie to creation is to give a lie to God. So we are not speaking of that. But in manifestation, time has to come into play. So how to deal with this process? Because we don't know how many paths we have started traveling in previous lives and in this life. And all of them have to be consummated, summated, something done, etc. One is by focusing on the inner story, which is going behind the several roles. And I put it like this, that we see a film actor, I'm giving a little crude example, but one which applies very well. So we see in one movie, he becomes a hero. In second, he's a side hero. In third, he's a villain. And fourth hero is a grandpa, etc., etc. But behind all these, the actor The actor is something else or someone else who is growing through all these changing stories. So we have to catch that inner thread. This is the only way we can go through this whole process. That inner thread is with the psychic being. So the first thing in the yoga is to find the psychic being, whatever time it takes, because then we can connect the inner thread. Imagine an actor who believes I am really this, and when in one of the shots he drops dead. What happens to him? He has to remember that no, I'm not dead. He has to get up. He has to once again cheer up. So that's why the psychic being is important. This is the way we can understand the play much better and play consciously. So this is the first part. And second is we have to have an unflinching faith, endurance, courage, surrender. Because yes, it will take time, because there are many, many knots and not all of them are bad. See, that's the interesting part. We think the entire karmic knot, no, they are all have a meaning. There was a person whom we met, figuratively, in a previous life and had a very nice, beautiful relationship developing, and it closed abruptly. That relationship had a potential to go as far as it could go. It will come again in life. Now you want to cut the knot, you can try it in traditional yogas. But the better way is to purify the energies of love and keep on connecting them with the divine. Because otherwise, these things will return and return. So that's why it is said to try to haste and be impatient is actually to delay the process, because that means we'll entangle ourselves more and more and more and more. Whereas if we try to look at it that, well, I have to keep on offering everything that comes in my life, then the path will become easier and simpler, but endurance will be required. Some things may have started very pleasantly, but they have to reach a dead end. Their consummation is only up to this point. You are supposed to take a leap toward the future through one of those time loops or time warps, if you want to use modern physics. And the other person whose hand you are holding cannot take a leap. What do you do in that situation? You have to leap, because each story is different. If you leap with the person, he may fall into one of those abysses. Now, these are the complexities that's why yoga takes place in real time. You cannot make a uniform rule about everyone. Whether one goes to an ashram or stays in the world, the process will be fundamentally the same. So the only way to manage time is by learning to surrender, by learning to have trust, complete trust in the divine, that whatever the appearance, he works. Our errors are, one who has made the world is ever its Lord. He works through our errors are his steps upon the way. He works through the fierce vicissitudes of our lives. He works through the hard breath of battle and toil. He works through our sins, our sorrows, and our tears. Whatever the appearance, we must bear. There comes the secret of time. Whatever the appearance, we must bear. His knowledge overrules our nescience. Whatever the appearance, we must bear, when nothing we can see but drift and bail. A mighty guidance leads us still through all. And when we go through that process, then at the end he says, a date is fixed in the calendar of the unknown, an anniversary of our birth sublime. Our soul shall justify its checkered walk. All shall come near that now is not or far. After we have served this great divided world, God's bliss and oneness are our inborn right. So the focus should be only to serve the mother, to, whatever veils are removed, and that veil is inwardly. It's not a person, it's an attachment within. So we keep removing the veil and keep connecting with the mother. And then time management is, time management in that sense is cosmic time management is her issue. So we should not get into that. And regarding the Aryan, so it's very interesting you reminded about the Aryan recover the Vedas. So he says it very clearly. Recover the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Aryan thought, not just in, by reading a book, the exact words are missing, but in life and action. You see the problem that took place after a point of time. We became Pandits. You see, when you read the stories of, who was that person, Ashtavakra, and that, it does the round. Ashtavakra going to his father's, somebody who was a arrogant Pandit and an ignorant Pandit who knew all the Shastras, who would get a person drowned in the river if he lost in the Shastra. And sure enough, Ashtavakra's father, I think it is Ashtavakra, but anyways, the point is that his father was also made to drown. And then Ashtavakra goes and there is a Vad Vivad or whatever debate and discussion. And finally Ashtavakra wins So as per the norms, he has to now drown himself, this man. And Ashtavakra kind of forgives him. Now the whole story I found so absurd. I mean, this man is doing it to prove a point, and he is also trying to avenge his father. That's not how Brahmagyanis live. That's not how a seeker after the divine live. That's what you find in Mother and Sri Aurobindo. That's not what is the true Aryan spirit. The true Aryan spirit is what you see in the ancient, in the Mahabharata, if you want to see. The surrender of Arjuna, when he faces the battle of life, he doesn't flinch or run away. He doesn't want to defeat somebody. That's the mentality of the Anaryan. The Karna, he wants to prove a point. I will make sure that in a real contest, I am the greatest, I am the greatest. What is Arjuna's bhav? You tell me, Madhav, where to shoot and I'll do that. Shishyasteham sadhimam. That is the Aryan spirit. To be surrendered to God and shoot. We see also in Bhishma. Bhishma is also an Aryan spirit. So Bhishma knows that truth is on that side. 100 Bhishmas cannot defeat Pandavas because Krishna is there. Yet he wants to fulfill his job. He has taken a promise and he must do that. And Shri Krishna knows that Bhishma has its place and he's doing what he has to do. And therefore he doesn't ask Bhishma to convert. But he goes to Karna and says, you are on the wrong track. You are being Anaryan. You have a possibility, and what are you doing? You're denying it for the sake of a false, misplaced virtue. I want to be friends and I want to be generous. How can friendship, generosity, or any of the qualities be greater than dharma and truth? So in Indian thought, truth and dharma are greater. That is the Aryan spirit, that anything we may do, bonhomie with friendship and all this, doesn't mean that it should be on the basis of adharma. Dharma is the foundation of creation. Truth is the foundation of creation. Satyamev jayate nan. Truth that has built the world. And if we deviate from truth in our inner beings to start with, if we don't even know why we are doing whatever we are doing, motives of actions, if we try to give a nice glossy cover, a lot of people say I'm doing karma yoga while they're basically earning money and looking for fame. But I'm doing karma yoga. Divine is deceived? No way. The Aryan spirit lives in this spirit that my body is a field for the divine sowing. So he's a farmer. Aryan comes from the word which means the sharp blade. You can apply it either to the foremost part of the plow. That let the divine plow this soil to bring out the plenty from the seed, which is divine seed, which is within. Or he's a warrior. He slays the darkness inside. Wherever he sees in one corner, he chases it. Not outside is the easier part, but what we see outside. So this is the Aryan spirit, to live it, not just read the Vedas, Upanishad. They are wonderful, without a doubt about it. But only so that we can live by that spirit. It's no point in knowing all the shlokas, reciting them wonderfully. Otherwise parrots would go to moksha, because there are parrots who can be taught, how to recite the Gita. It's living that truth. One moment of living the Gita. Look at this. Gita is given in a real battlefield, not a hermitage. Let us face the battle of life. How can we learn Gita in a hermitage? And one word of the Gita then is enough, that he is the all. And at his behest, the sun moves, the stars move. At his behest, men live and die. At his behest, my breath and heart beats. As long as he wants, they will take. This is the Aryan spirit, and not simply the Vedvad, the Pandit. So Sri Aurobindo is pointing toward that, because we have lived for long under this, process of debate, discussion, wearing a nice dress which looks comfortable to others, feel you are a Pandit. All this is hypocrisy. This is not renunciation. People even so-called renounce outwardly, live with wearing one dress. Why should you do that? Yes, if you are too much, okay, fine, it's a natural, comfortable expression, it's okay. But most often than not, it is also becomes a means to show who you are. So Aryan spirit is a large wideness of the soul, which has the courage to face life. He's a courageous person. One thing which is important about an Aryan is courage. And the second is faith. These two things. He has faith in himself, faith in destiny, faith in the divine. If faith and courage are there, and at his core is love. Even when he slays, it's not with hatred. Even when he fights, it's not with enmity. All are deceived, do what the one power dictates. In us too, Krishna seeks for love and joy. In us too, Shiva drinks the bitter cup of life. And at the end, he says, my enemies, rivals' downfall is my own disgrace. I look at my enemy and see Krishna's face. This is the Aryan spirit. And it comes only through yoga, not through reading of books. Reading a book can be a beginning. Very often it's a beginning. But the real thing is to put it into practice. Everything that we read, to read the 700 slokas of the Gita or to read the entire Savitri is easy part. But the difficult part is just to practice one line of Savitri. When Satyavan sees Savitri, what does he say? Now you have come, descend. I give myself completely to you. Just to practice that one little passage. Descend upon earth with thy moon gold feet, enrich earth's floors upon whose sleep we lie. Yeah. Sorry. Any other question? Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
This is Pete from Spain, near the Mediterranean Sea, as you said before. Thank you for your talk. I appreciate a lot. And my question is the mother a kind of vibration which includes energy, force, unlimited love, compassion, and joys? Can we understand mother as a complex vibration like that I told, and even more? Thank you.
Okay. So is the mother a complex energy force? I mean, is not just that. Are form and the formless. So too with the divine. There is the formless essence of the divine, and the mother is certainly that divine energy. She's the Shakti of the divine. So in that sense, she's the supreme force. But all things in manifestation take a form. So if we want to go out of this creation, we can look upon mother just as a supreme Shakti. That's how the Tantric Siddhas worship her. They go step by step through the 10 different forms of the divine mother, starting with Shailavala to Siddhidatri. And then she projects them into the formless. You know, that story of Ramakrishna and Totapuri, where he finally says that you have to slay even the form of Kali whom you worship with the sword of discernment. So you can be liberated into the utter infinite. Yes, if the goal is liberation, form becomes a means to arrive at the formless. But here, because the whole purpose is manifestation through form. In fact, all manifestation, even the gods have a form. All manifestation is about the form. So she is not just the divine Shakti disembodied, but the embodiment of the divine Shakti. And that makes a world of difference. Meaning thereby, she is working out in and through her own form, the possibilities of the human form being uplifted to the greatest heights. What is worked out in her form can work out within us if we open to her. So we have to look upon her not just as a divine Shakti, which she is, of course, but an embodied divine Shakti, which is what is meant by the avatar. Second aspect is that even the divine Shakti, which is beyond, is it just a force or a conscious force? Because it makes again a difference. When we use the word she is a force, now force we are used to, nature is a force. Everything is a force in this creation. So when we reduce things to force and vibrations, it's one way of looking at it, definitely, in a valid way. Science approaches like that. But what is that supreme force and supreme vibration? Is it not conscious of itself? Because it's supreme consciousness. That's how the world becomes conscious, because of a ray of that consciousness. So a force which is conscious of itself is by its very nature a being. You see, there is a little bit of an interesting thing about it. So when we disengage the force from the being, very often, human mind does it. Why? Because deep within, we don't want to surrender. You see, force is impersonal, but being is personal. So when there is a being, you surrender to the being. Force is like, I just open to the force. Sri Aurobindo was very careful, and to note this, remind us that your surrender has not to be to the force, but to the divine mother. Why? Because when we surrender to the force, there is the force, divine force, which is impersonal. Then its action can be devastating. It's like saying that, well, I know the way electricity operates in these clouds, and therefore I can make my own switches. Well, one can do it, but more often than not, we'll end up blowing up the house. But when you ask for the one who knows the entire technology, she builds your house, she knows the entire process. Not that one cannot discover, but probably one will blow up the body 100 times before one can discover. So the divine as being, we connect to her as, yes, the divine Shakti and the divine force and the divine being. So that's how the Indian thought has described him as Satchidananda. He is not just consciousness, he is also being, existence, the one true existence, and he is Ananda. So both are one, the divine being and the divine consciousness. In Sri Aurobindo's yoga, we look upon the divine not just as a force, but as conscious force, which is a being with whom we can connect. Because if there is no being, there is no role of bhakti. Because bhakti implies that there is a being, somebody who can connect with us, relate with us. Now, if we take her only as a conscious force, then the path changes. And the joy of bhakti and the heart will never be nourished, because the heart wants to connect with the divine. And Sri Aurobindo says not only it can connect, it is the crown of yoga. So this is where we have to be careful. If this is true that she is the divine force, but not just the divine force. She is also divine consciousness, divine ananda, divine wisdom, divine truth, divine existence, and the divine being, all of it together. And she can express herself through a law of vibration, starting from the original star, Nada. But all these are ways and aspects of herself. But she remains herself in infinite. So this is where it ends. So she is infinity putting on a human shape. And this mystery of taking a human shape is important, because it makes it very easy. Sri Aurobindo does speak about the avatar and speaks about the embodiment. It makes it so much easy. Not that one cannot do it like that. One can try, but Sri Aurobindo said, most likely you will land up in a hard cropper, because, one is entering a field about which one has no idea. Trying to call the supramental force, one may end up calling all kinds of forces, because we have no clue about, the play of forces in this world. There are people who apparently believe that it's the Kundalini which is awakened. But 99% of the time, it is nothing but the vital energy which goes up and down the spine. And they think it is a Kundalini. She says if in one person it awakens by sheer, because in traditional yoga, Kundalini is awakened by the power of will and the Bij mantras, which is a forced way of opening it. So if it opens up and awakens, the onrush of that energy will devastate the system. So in most people, it is that vital energy flowing up and down the column, Saraswati, Ganga, Jamuna, and one feels very nice, gives a very lot of energy, good feeling, but that's not Kundalini. In Sri Aurobindo's yoga, the entire descent of the divine Shakti is from above to the base, because it's a conscious process. You can handle it. And therefore, to connect with her as the divine Shakti, but as the embodied divine Shakti. What she has worked out, she can pass it on to us just by opening to her as the divine being, as the form. And Sri Aurobindo even used a word, beware of a hostile asuric maya, which creates the distinction. So people were asking that, yes, you have spoken about divine mother. In synthesis, you will see divine Shakti. But later on, he said, open to the mother. So he said, it's the same thing. He said, no, beware of that maya which draws the distinction. I mean, why not directly to the divine Shakti? He said, beware of that maya. You have to open to the mother, not to the force, not even to the mental force, because obviously he knew what will happen as a result. So this is for the yoga. But theoretically, yes, she is all that we can conceive of, mankind is conceived of. Even this material nature is she. So she was asked that, what is the difference between this nature and that? She said, yes, she is this also, but this is the nature in ignorance. This has to be rejected. Then only the higher supernature can come. So we can call her as supernature, Lyle Watson's book. She is the supernature. Where you look behind plants and their operations, you see that supernature, consciousness and force operating. But that will not help us to transform us, because that nature has fixed itself within limits through this inferior nature. So while we can appreciate that, yes, there is consciousness, force, and intelligence behind creation, but that we cannot draw within us. That's why there is yoga. Automatically it won't happen. She operates through the veil of the Yoga Maya, in the book, The Mother, chapter 2, Sri Aurobindo says, the divine is in everything and everywhere, but he is hidden by the veil of the Yoga Maya. It is his Maya, because we are not ready for that complete. So turn to her as the mother, as the embodiment, to be more like one whose name was Mira Alfonso. This, well, she's the avatar for this work. That's all. Yeah. Namaste.
If I understand, what we are talking about is to embody the Satchitananda
Yes.
in mirror fasa, because if we are
Yes.
doing it this concrete way, we can be linked with the source.
Yes. One
Oh.
small little thing with that, yes, the embodiment of Satchidananda. Except that even Krishna is an embodiment of Satchidananda. In a certain sense, we are all embodiments of Satchidananda. But the difference is that an avatar is given a specific work. So to Krishna, who is also Satchidananda Ghanaghansham, that's what he is called. Or Rama is Satchidananda Swarup. So the embodiment takes us to the point where the embodiment is meant to lead us. So Shri Krishna will take us to the point where he is meant to lead us. Probably if we are meant to go beyond, he will hand us over to Sri Aurobindo. That's far and no further. So that's where the mystery of form lies. And when we turn to her as an embodiment of Satchidananda, but as one who has the mandate to lead creation from the mental to the supramental state, then it will be perfect. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have few questions in the chat box. Alokda, will you have some time to take them now?
I can take the questions now, and surely, I mean, I can.
Sure, so we'll
Yes,
just
please.
make it quick. The first question is, how can the physical manage to aspire since it is the mind that thinks?
Yes, good question. How will the physical manage to aspire, because it's the mind that thinks? Mind doesn't think. Mind only gives form of to all that is happening. That's all that the mind does. It's a preformation. So, but it's the interesting part is mind is the mediator divinity. It is the link through which we become conscious. Let's say my body having a discomfort. Now the mind says, oh, I'm having a little pain there. Oh, I'm feeling a sukham here. So mind is the mediator. So the beauty of the mind is it can pick up the physical sensations and adding its own thought formation. Sri Aurobindo describes it as a paraclete, take it to the supreme. So what it means practically is that when I do exercise with the mind, I can say, may this exercise be not just for bodybuilding, but to make the body supple and fit for your purposes. And as Mother said, prayer of the cells of the body in so many ways. The body's prayer, body has to be given a form of prayer, and the mind can engage into it. Of course, doing work for the mother itself is the body's prayer, but it can be given a very concrete form. So mind's purpose is that in human being, man is the neta, mana prana sharira neta. And the sign of this will be that, whether it's really happening or not happening, that we will become indifferent to all the things that make the body, we'll be freed from subjection to all the environmental things, sheath, ocean, all these, it's very hot, it's very cold, oh, the AC is not working. All these things will go away. That will be the sign that the physical is getting ready for the divine working. So this is how the mind has to be brought in. If one is very conscious within the body, a time comes when one is conscious within the body, then the body also directly can aspire, but the mind helps it. It picks up the signals and transduces, gives them a thought form. It can do it without a thought form. So that's how it is to be done. And one has to offer every action of the body. Sri Aurobindo goes on to say, even our very breathing, our activities which are most autonomous, for instance, excretion, even those things have to be offered to the divine. So who will do the offering through thoughts? It is the mind which will give a thought. Otherwise, it can be an inner state that all is entering into it. It can be an image, anything. Yeah.
See it later.
The next question is, how to find the psychic being?
Oh, how to find the psychic being is a big I can only give a sutra. It's there on Aroma Tube, several talks we have had. But the simplest way is psychic being the right heart center. So to find the psychic being, simplest is to go to the heart, which means devotion, bhakti, surrender, love for the divine. This is the simplest, easiest path. But there are two kinds of bhakti. One is the very surface kind of bhakti, which is happy to jump and dance and sing some nice songs, and it remains unchanged, where emotions are not given to the divine. There is only an external bhakti where one goes, does this, what is called as matha tekna, paripana, touch and forget about it. That's not bhakti, or bhakti which is hatuki bhakti, that I want this, I want that. Now, this is a vital bhakti. It doesn't lead us very far. One day it can open the door, because after asking things from the divine, one day we may say, who is this fellow who is granting me things? I want him, this guy who is sitting out there in the heart. But the real bhakti is the very quiet, silent. It is a bhakti where we give ourselves to the divine. And there is a joy in giving, not giving, okay, I'm giving to the divine. Maybe in 1 year time, I will have the supramental realization. That's again conditional. Psychic bhakti makes no reservations. It's an unconditional bhakti. So basically, the best way to find the psychic being is through bhakti, love, surrender, unconditionally, without what the divine will give me. No. He may even take away whatever I called as minds. Look at the life of Meera. Look at Sri Aurobindo when he says, I know God will help, but he has contracted a bad habit of helping at the last time. And there's a joy in that. It's a joy of the play. So till then, one has to become ready. Not that one can feign this state. But bhakti, surrender, love is the best and shortest way. And at the same time, concentration in the heart, having this will for the discovery. And that means not be tied to the ephemeral outer personality. I'm this, I'm that. I have a big biodata card. No, that's irrelevant. I am that soul which is eternal within, to always to remember it and to keep focusing on that. Yes, in short. Yeah. To love the mother. Shortest. Yeah. Or at least to love. Love truly. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, the next question is on similar lines. Being in the world and devoting to divine is much more difficult than giving up everything and move away from the world for self-devotion. How does one start her journey of self-devotion in the world with all sorts of layers?
So it works both ways, living in the world and giving ourselves to the divine and renouncing the world. It works both ways, actually. So there is a recompense. Yes, doing it while being in the world is more difficult initially. But very soon, one enters a very wide Grand Trunk Road. Because then it doesn't matter, any activity can become a means for the communion and the union. Besides, also because of our nature, through the works and through meeting, people, meeting means because in work you are bound to meet situations and circumstances and people most of all. So they make our nature more supple and ready to receive the divine. Whereas if we do an exclusive concentration, initially it is easy, but after a point, the path gets blocked. It becomes very difficult to cut through. One has to be then like a Meera. That renunciation is not just a simple renunciation, that I just move out of my family into an ashram and do it. No. Then it has to be, even people go to ashram and they get attached to everything there, to the little comforts of life. Even there is the senior Swamiji and the, more advanced sadhak and the less advanced sadhak. So that renunciation where there is an exclusive concentration is not easy beyond a point. Initially, it's easy. One leaves the worldly things. But after that, there is a tremendous struggle. Whereas if one proceeds through the world and gets prepared, that's why in Sri Aurobindo Ashram, both Pondicherry and Delhi, I'm sure, you can't renounce the world the way one renounces it outside. Because that's the path. So if we are engaged in the world, it's difficult in the beginning, no doubt. But if one practices the all-inclusive concentration, then after a while, one enters the Grand Trunk Road and the Gadi goes very fast. Whereas the other ways initially looks like a big road and or a narrow road, but no traffic. But very soon you hit roadblocks. It's like ascending a mountain where you start with a little path and afterwards it's breathtaking. So it depends on the temperament, I suppose. But in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, it has to be the all-inclusive concentration through the world. That's why in the 3rd chapter of the Mother, it is to walk through life. So anyways, in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, it has to be through life. Now, of course, not, as I said in the beginning, not engaging with the world in the ignorant way. but yet not to cut life, but to walk through life. So we have anyways no choice. So because we have taken this yoga. Even in ashram, the world will be there very much. So yes.
Just one last.
It's a question of being focused on the goal. It doesn't matter. One may be in the forest and yet like Jad Bharat, worried about animals, worried about Paryavaran and all that. Nothing wrong with Paryavaran worrying. And one may be in the midst of the world, yet like a lotus leaf connected with it. So that's a question of the intensity with which we are seeking the divine. If he becomes the reason of our existence, then it doesn't matter where we live. Yes. Yes.
Just one last question in the chat box. What is dharma?
Oh, what is dharma is okay. Again, in very what are all these objects and things moving in space? Is it nothingness? Dharma would say no, there is satyam. What has arranged these objects the way they are arranged? Is it a chance coincidence? Dharma would say no, there is a meaning in each curve and line. It's rhythm. This vastness is held by the foundation is truth. So first understanding of dharma is, it is that imperishable. Truth is not my truth, your truth, I spoke truth and he told lies. Not, I mean, all that are good things to understand. But truth is the foundation, means that which cannot be, it is imperishable. It cannot fall. Achyutam, akshitam. It is not subject to degeneration. Akshar Brahman. So that is the foundation of truth. That is dharma. Second, dharma is not just the foundation, it is expressing itself in creation. So the next level of dharma is that in manifestation, it manifests through a law of truth that is called as rhythm. And then a point comes as this law of truth unfolds and enters into forms and nature. There is the little deviation here and there, as the mother says, the formatures comes into play and everybody brings a little deviation. So there is a deviation from the original law of truth into adharma. Adharma is nothing but deviation from the law of truth. So what is this law of truth? For example, that this world has been created by sacrifice and oneness is a law of truth. Try deviating from it. What is the deviation from that law of oneness? I will live for myself and myself alone. Egoism is deviation from the law of truth. So what happens when we live by adharma? Dharma strikes us. How it strikes us? Dharma brings delight, harmony. When we live only for myself, me and myself, after some time, the joy is lost. So we want to capture it. So we try to get more and more objects. The joy is lost still further because we are continuing with adharma. Then a time comes when we are so desperate. We try to conquer people, this, that, build an empire. The joy still eludes us because we have deviated from dharma. One day a time comes that with all our wealth, we cannot buy joy. So if one is very fortunate, one says, Shishyasteham sadhima, Lord, I give all this that I seem to have to you. And then dharma awakens in us and brings joy, brings harmony, brings peace. So the nature of dharma is that it's there in this world. There is a law of truth according to which we should live. So aligning our inner self to that law of truth, which is the law of oneness, not the law of the separative ego, that is dharma. Then there is the third level at which the dharma expresses itself in outward actions. So if the inner law of truth that there is oneness, so how will I deal with all the creatures? Will I say, will I hit a animal because the animal is just an animal? No, even in the animal there is the divine. The law of truth means that I must deal with the animal with love and kindness. Will I deal with the plants in a very crude way? Kaat do, mera ghar bana do? No. I will try to conserve these plants and I'll know that there is nityo nityanam chetanash chetananam eko bahunam yuviditati kaman, that there is the same consciousness dwelling in it. How will I deal with my material things? Not throw away. Okay, pen toot gaya, use and throw. We do it. This use and throw thing came from wherever, I'm not going to name, but people started first using and throwing objects, then they started doing the same with human beings. Use and throw. But when we understand that, well, things have a consciousness, even material things, then I'll deal with them consciously. So that becomes dharma. So when there is a dead body, we don't say, oh, he's dead body. Doctors will say, all these people who come and do this namaste, just sentimental fools. This is a dead body. Take it to the mortuary. We'll not do that, because we know that even in the dead body, the divine dwells. And there was the soul within, which is still disengaging with the body. So we say pranam, not to the dead body, but to the indweller within the body. So the entire way of dealing in outer life changes. And that's how the Chaturvarna had come out of that dharma, that there is an evolutionary hierarchy, which democratic processes have completely forgotten. There is the man who is completely, he dwells only in the physical world, cannot see beyond the tip of his nose. And that's the way man's journey begins. Then there is a man who enters into the larger commerce of life, still for selfish purposes. And then there is a man who works for the light, the right, the truth. That's the third level. And finally, there is the seeker after knowledge. So that's how the Chaturvarna and the dharma of each type became. And then in each one, there is this unique unfolding of truth. It caters for individuality. What is that unique unfolding? To one person, it may be, leave everything, put it in the bonfire, and go and be a monk and go all over the world. Swami Vivekananda. To another person, the same dharma may say, no, live at the feet of your master forever, Nag Mahasaya. To a third person, it may say, Arjuna, come fight for me in the world with actual bow and arrow. So in each one, this Swadharma will express itself differently. In Buddha, it tells him to the same dharma, you have to discover a greater law and walk away from your kingdom. To another person, to Yudhishthira, the dharma is govern your kingdom with righteousness, under the greater umbrella of truth. So that is the Swadharma aspect. So this in very brief is about dharma. It comes from the root dhra, dharan. So dharati, dharana, all of them comes from the same root, dharma. Dharna, in Hindi we have the word dharna. Kisko dhara hai? So that which is dhara, that which holds this creation, that which holds us, that which holds every element of creation, that is dharma. Yes. It is not about morality. It's not an artificial virtue and vice. It's not drawing a column around life and saying this is black and white. Dharma is not about that. It's an ever-evolving process. The dharma at one point may change as we evolve. So that is the other part. Black and white, this big problem is there. Also, black and white doesn't take into cognizance the inner state. You may do everything as duty, but where is love? Love has passed away. So dharma, that's why it is called as gahano karmani gati, because what is that inner state? One may be living in a monastery or an ashram, but not by dharma. One may be all the time grumbling, complaining. See, look at that person, he got promoted and I am still there. So dharma is about knowing that the divine exists, to put it in a nutshell. And this world is not the creation of a chance accident emerging out of some weird nothingness, but nothingness itself is a dress that the divine has worn. He transcends it. And he has expressed himself through countless names and forms, each of which is a letter in the Veda, which is written in the heart of mankind, as well as in this vast material universe, the Virat. So when we understand dharma that way, then life becomes easy and simple. All right. So shall we stop now?
Yes, that will bring us to the end of the session. Once again, thank you so much for giving us time. We close
Thank
for
you.
today with the meditative music. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.